Hello, beautiful people. I want to start today's video by asking, are you also an emotional person? Perhaps a very sensitive being? It's likely not something that you choose to be. It's probably something that's been fostered since childhood conditioning and what was happening around you, but also a sense of that being an innate gift, the ability to sense what's in the air, how people are feeling, maybe something that's under the surface that's happening behind the scenes that most people aren't able to pick up on. If you're one of those people, yeah, you're my tribe. So I've always been quite an emotional and sensitive being. I have a lot of Pisces in me, if you're familiar with astrology. And like what I said, I feel like it's something that's being fostered in childhood based on what's happening around us. Maybe at some point, you also had to learn to read people's energy and emotions, and whether that has made you a bit of a people pleaser or a peacemaker or a diplomat within your friend group. So I say all that to say, I didn't always love this part of me. We're not kind of taught as a society to embrace our sensitivity or that kind of like softer feminine side and emotional being able to kind of feel it all, whether that is joy or sadness or grief or anger. This emotional kind of nature of mine has gotten me into some troubles before, times when I wasn't able to kind of understand what was happening inside of me, but I just knew that I was sensing and feeling a lot and I was overwhelmed. And maybe that resulted in me lashing out at people who didn't deserve it, or bottling up a lot of emotions and allowing those things to eat me from the inside out. Yeah, I say all that to say I didn't used to embrace it as much as I do now, and that is because over the years with healing and growth and inner work, I've learned to embrace it as being such a gift, because essentially the work that I do right now, holding space and guiding people through their own healing processes, is very similar to what I've always done, but I've kind of been able to direct it in a more positive and transformational way, in which I have a bit more control of. So, what I'm talking about is the emotional alchemy process. It's just something that I've kind of discovered along the way by stringing together the different modalities and insights that I've learned, wisdom learned from teachers, and of course, my own experience and trainings and working with clients and observing friends and family, and just the collective kind of energy. I feel like more and more of us are beginning to either embrace or cultivate this sensitive side of us, even just the rise of the feminine, and knowing that life isn't just about structure and discipline and go, go, go. It's also about slowing down and feeling what's within, and maybe respecting, if you're a woman as well, respecting the cyclical nature of life that is both within us and also without, so outside of us. So coming back to emotional alchemy, that is why I wanted to make this video today, to share something that's so close to my heart. So let's get right into it. First things first, we're going to start with what is emotional alchemy. It can sound like such an abstract idea. Essentially, alchemy, even just stripping the word emotion out of it, alchemy means transformation. Transforming, the art of transforming lead into gold, transforming nothing into everything, right? So that's the key essence. And when we add the word emotion in it, so emotional alchemy, in the context specifically of healing and of growth, there are two ways that I look at it. One is transforming the emotion itself. I view emotion as having two flavors. So there's that lower octave of the same emotion, but there's also a higher octave to the emotion. I first kind of discovered the idea of it, not in those exact terms, but the idea of it in my first training with my mentor. And it was a group training program working, I think all of us were women. And if you're a woman too, you might be able to understand or resonate a bit more with what I'm about to share, which She was sharing about the emotion of anger and how a lot of women, we haven't really allowed ourselves to feel anger because it's something that feels so scary, so fiery, so out of control. Within the range of emotions, there seems to be emotions that are acceptable. Of course, joy, love, excitement, just all things sweet. But there are also the emotions that feel messier, denser, uglier. But even within those, I feel like there are ones that also seem or are deemed a bit more appropriate. You can cry, but especially for women, being angry is such a scary, witchy things to do. So a lot of us kind of suppress emotions like anger. And when my mentor was speaking to this, she just said, anger is actually a beautiful emotion because it points to us where our boundaries are. When we feel angry, more often than not, it speaks directly to where we perhaps have allowed a boundary to be crossed and that we didn't honor and respect our sovereignty. And that's why the fiery emotion of anger needs to arise in us to allow us to claim our space, say our no's, and claim our sovereignty again. And so when I first heard that idea, I was like, wow, that's fascinating. So I think then there was already a little seed that was planted in me that, okay, emotion can seem like there are two ways to look at it, right? Emotion can seem like such maybe perhaps in the patriarchal system, such an unnecessary thing, such an inconvenient thing, right? But I could also argue that emotion can be seen as a very neutral energy. When we learn to work with it, we can transform it from its ugliness or rather its messiness to something that is beautiful, something that can be a gift, can be wisdom, can be something that speaks to each of us individually as a very individualized message. Because I believe that each of us have certain lessons and phases and seasons of healing. If we listen to the thread of our emotions, we are able to then uncover much quicker and also clearer the lesson, the gem that exists in each phase of our life. So, coming back to this first point with emotional alchemy, the first way I see it is the art of transforming. And transforming what? It's transforming the emotion itself from its lower octave to its higher octave. Meaning, again, something that might feel denser. In emotional alchemy, the concept is emotions are our messengers, right? It's here to bring and guide us, bring a message to us and guide us on our spiritual healing path. And if we allow it to transform, we can transform that emotion into its lightness, into its light form, its higher octave, something that can serve us and help us become a better person. Which brings me to the second point of transformation. So, apart from just transforming the emotion itself, a way that I see emotional alchemy is also allowing the whole experience, the whole human experience. There's something so primal about emotion. Every single human being who has ever walked this earth has felt emotion, every person, right? So it's something that is just within us. That is the reason also why I see emotion as neither good or bad. It's simply a live experience. But coming back to my second point, so the transformation would be using this human experience, having emotions, to transform our life, to bring about more growth, more healing, transform us into a better version of self. So, I already mentioned this earlier. A core kind of message and belief in emotional alchemy that sits right in the center of emotional alchemy is that emotions are messengers, it's our guiding compass. And the whole idea is that we allow emotion to point to us, like see it as a signal, right? Point to us what needs to be addressed. They point to a deeper truth, and then it's up to us whether or not we want to have the courage to feel it, to heal it. Because when we choose to turn toward these emotions, they can actually reveal a deeper truth, reveal a wisdom that is meant for us at that exact time. When we choose to work with this experience, we can allow it to transform us into a better version of self, dream version of self, the self that we know we're here to step into. So I know that even though I gave you all the definition, it might still sound a little abstract. You might be wondering, so okay, what exactly is emotional alchemy? Is it a healing modality? Is it a lifestyle? Is it a like a system? Is it something that you just practice every day? And my answer would be all of the above. So I first kind of discovered this process of working with emotions, through my one-on-one client work where I guide them essentially. There are many layers to it, which we'll go into in a little bit, but guiding them into their body, into their nervous system safety, into feeling safe enough to come a bit closer to the very raw feelings that they're experiencing on a body level and on an emotional level, and using those emotions to allow those emotions to reveal something that's deeper, whether that is a limiting belief or something that's an energetic stuck point that exists in our body that hasn't gotten the chance to be released, or something else. So that is what happens in a section. But I've also found that, as in my personal practice, it is something that's not limited to just like a 60 or 90-minute section. It's something that when you learn the skills, when you remember how it's like to feel in the body, when you remember how it's like to feel safe enough to feel, and knowing what to do with those emotions, it is something that you can very well bring into the real world, into the outside world. Even as you're like, say, on the street, someone bumped into you, and maybe immediately you feel a lot of rage, and maybe different flashbacks are coming back. All the times in the past when someone has disrespected you, and then you realize there are all these kind of anger that you haven't really looked at. So that's just an example of how following the thread of one emotion can lead you to uncover deeper truths within you. So when we're familiar with kind of how to work with our emotions instead of against it, it's something that we can very well experience every day, any moment, anywhere. The ability to use life as a practice ground. Healing is not just very similar to a concept in yoga. We need to have our practice on the mat as well as off the mat. Healing is not just something that happens within a meditation or a healing section. It's our ability to bring our healing outside of those more structured sections in time and spaces into our everyday life. So I already gave you a little bit of example here and there, I think specifically with anger. One of the other common emotion that I also see in people, whether that be client or friends or even myself, would be the emotion of frustration. Frustration, I could argue, would be one of the most beautiful, most telling, and also the most frustrating emotion because it speaks directly to what is not working. And I feel like it's so common because as human beings, I don't know why, there's a part of us that's kind of addicted to sticking with what isn't working, even though there is a deeper part. I trust that if you're here, you're also an intuitive being that perhaps also already do a lot of self-reflection work. But yeah, you know what I mean when you sit with yourself, and a lot of the problems or issues or the parts in your life where you feel like you're hitting a wall, if you really sit with yourself, it's almost like you already knew. You already knew the answer, you already knew the solution, but a lot of times, it is fear, it is limiting beliefs, it is a lot of different things that could be holding us back. Not a judgment, it's not right or wrong, but it's just something that I observe in human beings. Also myself, of course, that we sometimes we're kind of addicted to the chaos, and we love working against ourselves. So, which is maybe why frustration is one of the most common emotions I see in people. Again, it points to what isn't working. When we're unaware of how emotions, sitting with our emotions, feeling our emotions, healing our emotions, when we're unaware of how the importance of emotion, right? Of listening to the wisdom within our emotions. we can often turn to what I call band-aid solutions, which is, as the name suggests, just solutions that feel like band-aids that temporarily would give us relief, but don't really solve the underlying issue. The core problem would still be there. And so this feeling of frustration would still find a way to ooze out of some other places. So classic band-aid solutions I see would be, say, gossiping, alcohol, partying, drugs, sex, shopping, just things that kind of temporarily bring us into escapism. And again, I can't stress this enough. None of what I say here is a judgment, it's an observation. And I too have one too many times fallen into turning toward band-aid solutions instead of sitting with my emotion and turning toward the wisdom and the gold that is available within the emotions. So one example I can think of is, I made a separate video on this called Purpose Isn't a Job, It's a Frequency, where I shared at length actually my story when I was at corporate 9 to 5 job. And during that period of time, especially the last 1 or 2 years, there were a lot of frustration that arose. I remember I would feel so frustrated, not just during work hours, but also outside of work. And I would often lash out at people. Perhaps that was my partner or my coworkers or sometimes even my manager, not because I don't like them, not because they're bad people, but because there were a lot of different things that were kind of happening inside of me and I didn't exactly know how to deal with it, or maybe there was also a part of me that didn't want to deal with it. So the emotions kind of just came out everywhere. After some time, I don't think I've kind of properly discovered the emotional alchemy process yet, but what I did was essentially sitting in the emotional alchemy process, which step one, I started, I stopped with all the band-aid solutions, and I knew that the feelings I was feeling, the frustration, was not going anywhere. I had to sit with it, and so I sat with it. And upon reflection, I realized that underneath the frustration, there were actually a lot of different interesting things that were happening. There's actually a concept that is called primary emotions and secondary emotions that we all feel. Primary emotions, actually let's talk about secondary emotions, because I talked about frustration. At that time when I sat with myself and reflected what I was feeling and this and that, I realized frustration wasn't the core. It was a secondary emotion that kind of was developed to help mask the deeper truths that I was feeling, which were the primary emotions of perhaps insecurity, of helplessness, of anxiety, anxiousness. And what primary emotions are, they are the emotions that are the most direct, like the instantaneous reaction, the first response that we have in relation to something that's happened, right? So those are oftentimes the raw emotions, the more vulnerable ones that we actually don't really want to admit. We'll talk about this in a moment, which is, in order to feel things, our body needs to first feel safe enough to feel. And so a lot of times we don't really feel safe enough to be vulnerable in those very real feelings, very raw feelings, because a lot of times they can point to deeper, even deeper things that are happening in our system, which could point to childhood memory, could point to family system, could point to our belief systems, etc. And so in order to kind of lean away from the discomfort of the vulnerability, what actually happened was we developed these secondary emotions, which is like a layer above it, like a shield, right? And those emotions, the function of secondary emotions would be to help protect us from the rawness of what we actually feel. Coming back to the example with my 9 to 5 job, so I spoke about how I was constantly frustrated for like a year or two. But then I realized that's just the shield, the blanket. What I was actually feeling underneath, the vulnerable emotions are, I was feeling very helpless because I desperately did not like my job, but I didn't know what to do. I was feeling perhaps a little shameful or even insecure because I was already on my spiritual path, and I knew there were a lot of concepts about how we need to take a leap and trust in the universe. And I feel like I know of all of these things, but I wasn't able to do it and actually implement those teachings in my life. And so I was feeling a little bit of guilt, a little bit of shame. So these are just some examples of the primary emotions that I was feeling underneath. So, from just a little bit that I shared, the emotional alchemy process can be one that is quite nuanced. It can be a little different from some of the more common spiritual teachings or quotes that we hear being tossed around, like be love and be light and be light and be love. And not saying that those aren't true, those are absolutely true. I believe that the core essence of all of us is love and oneness. At the same time, because I love working with the humanity of things, right? I think there is something also very beautiful and admirable about honoring excuse me, our human experience. And the human experience is messy. It's at times illogical, it's ugly. So it's also really beautiful to not bypass that and also tend to that. Not bypassing our emotion is one of the core pillars in the emotional alchemy process, because we first have to feel things to heal things. And I want to talk a little bit more about that in just a moment. But yeah, so we're not bypassing the very real emotions that we're having. Simply means that when we're feeling even an ugly emotion as they arise, jealousy, anger, frustration, we're not trying to be like, no, 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 I'm good, think love and joy, think happy place. Because I've done that, especially during my law of attraction phase. What I prefer to do these days is to be brave enough to go into the emotions and know that we won't be manifesting anything bad as long as we're tending to something that's real, allowing us to not bypass the very real experience that we're having. And in doing so, we also at the same time lessen the resistance that we have on our path. So, not bypassing, allowing us to feel. And another trap that I see is also allowing ourselves to feel too much, as in, okay, maybe too much is the wrong word, but in the sense that we slowly wallow in our perhaps victim mindset. Then we start to believe that things are happening to us. We have all these emotions because all these things happened, especially during my phase of first discovering about inner child work and how our family history and society conditioning really shape us and our trauma. There was a period of time that I really wallowed in it, right? I allowed myself to feel it all, which is beautiful. But then after some time, without really doing anything about it, simply feeling and kind of just like wallowing in the emotions, I realized that I've developed a little bit of a victim mindset, and I forgot that life is always happening for us and not to us. Emotional alchemy is not about bypassing, but it's not about wallowing as well. I love to see it as taking the beautiful middle path of allowing ourselves to feel, not being afraid of feeling, but also having the courage and the discernment to take decisive, aligned action to create our reality, to not let what happened to us or our emotions dictate how our life is going to continue to be. If you've gotten to this part of the video and you're starting to think like, oh, this is something that I'd like to start practicing or incorporating as part of my practice, here are the two skills I would say we can start working with and eventually master. First is the skill, or rather the art of fully feeling fully, just like what I mentioned earlier. This skill is about allowing ourselves to feel, but as I mentioned in earlier part of this video, it is also not so simple. If you have been in the spiritual community for a while, you might have heard the term, we need to feel it to heal it. We need to feel it to heal it. Someone should make it into a song at this point, but we need to feel it to heal it. We need to feel it to heal it. We need to heal it. We need to feel it to heal it. Yeah, but it's not that simple because the body can only feel what feels safe enough to feel. And let's be honest, we have not been taught how to feel. We've not been really taught emotional intelligence in this world. If you look back to your middle school, high school, or even university curriculum, we don't really have any lessons on emotional intelligence or nervous system regulation, or even as simple as how to verbalize what we're feeling, right? So let's just accept that as a foundation, that we've not been taught that. And so as adults now that our brains are fully developed and we have our own belief systems and this and that, it's very hard to suddenly ask someone to dismantle all that and now go immediately 0 to 100, go immediately into the world of feeling it all nonetheless, right? And especially during this time when there's so much that is happening around the world right now. I don't like to ask people to go, especially from having like not felt a thing in their life or taught to push aside their emotions, to going into feeling it all and just embracing it all. Not that we won't be able to get there, but the nervous system tolerance is a skill. The tolerance to be able to feel a wide range of emotions, depth of emotions, I believe is a skill. It's a skill just like how you could ride a bike, you can learn how to cook. It's a skill that can be developed, can be learned, can be practiced, and it's something that we can get better at over time. Maybe not at first. Maybe you can. But over time, for sure. The reason why my approach at least, I don't love to rush people into feeling it all, especially if especially if people have complex history, many different traumatic bubbles that live in the body. It could be very traumatizing to kind of relive it all and kind of just being thrusted into this realm of needing to confront everything that we've not been facing all our lives. If you're someone who's like, I want to feel it all, to heal it all, but maybe sometimes when it gets a little too much, it feels a little scary and you kind of lean away from the discomfort and you lean away from facing your fears and your healing, yeah, don't let that, don't beat yourself up over that, okay? I also want to share with you the two fears that I see that commonly block us from feeling it all, just to give your brain a little bit of context on like why this happens, even if we desperately want to face our traumas and to heal it. The first one is, again, coming back to that nervous system safety tolerance. There is going to be a part of us, the part that loves and want to protect us so much, that wonder, what if I allow the floodgate of emotions to just open and I feel it all and I can't take it? There is a very, very real fear that the body won't be able to hold the intense emotions and that it will die. There are many, many people throughout history who have died from heartache, from heartbreak. So it's a very real thing that emotional blockages can translate into the physical body. The nervous system, it's kind of looking out for you. What if I can't, what if it's too much? What if I can't take it all? What if I can't feel it all and still be safe? The good news is, like what I mentioned, nervous system capacity, the capacity to feel, is a skill that can be developed. And if you're interested, I have recorded a whole bundle. I believe it's bundle 2, so there are 3 bundles in total, but I believe it's the second bundle, that I included different practices, some of my favorite practices, from tapping to breath play to just a guided process to begin to kind of dip our toe into feeling and coming back to safety, and feel and coming back to safety. So if you're interested, I will link that in the description box as well. So the second fear would be the fear that, what if feeling a certain emotion makes me a bad person? Okay, it sounds quite illogical, but we're all kind of afraid that we will be defined by the things that we feel. I love giving this classic example because it's something that I have felt as a woman many, many times in my life. And for a majority, of my life, I felt a lot of shame just feeling these, again, natural emotions, which is, I don't know if it's ever happened to you that, say, a friend is getting married, or she just got a promotion, or just something like amazing happened to her, like her life's just perfect. And say like you don't have those things yet, Okay, have you ever kind of battled with this feeling that there's a part of you that you are happy for her or you want to be happy for her, but you also can't help but notice there's this different part that feels a little bit of jealousy, a little bit of like, I envy her. I'm not sure I'm like totally happy for her. And without knowing how emotions work, especially that emotions it's such a it can be complex and multiple truths can exist at the same time, but if we didn't know that and just felt what we felt, it's very easy to fall into the trap of like, oh my god, what does that say about me? Am I a bad friend? Am I a jealous woman? And I would say not at all. There's a reason why we feel what we feel. We need to detach the idea that our emotion, detach the emotion from our identity. And a very quick way to even reframe that is to say, for example, if you're tempted to say things like, oh, I'm an angry person, I'm this, I am that, take the I am away and just say, I'm feeling angry, I'm feeling this. Or one thing that I love using is part theory, just simply adding the word a part of me feels XYZ. A part of me is feeling happy, but there's a part of me that's feeling something else. Okay? And just letting that be exactly as it is without needing it to mean anything about you as a person. So those are the two kind of hidden fears that we all have, a very primal thing, again, because we've just simply not been taught emotional intelligence. We've not been taught the skills to navigate our inner world and what's happening inside. And so, yeah, it's not your fault, but we're here to fix that. All right, moving on. Hopefully, by now, you have a slightly better understanding of what emotional alchemy is, whether as a healing modality or a way of relating to life as an emotional person, which simply means a person with emotions, which we all are. I also like to share how it's different from, say, talk therapy, because talking, sharing, understanding what's happening mentally on a psychological level is also part of it. Because I don't want to completely disregard the benefits of talk therapy. I think there's tremendous benefit, especially, you know, compared to not having an outlet, not processing anything, and just bottling everything up. There's wonderful things that talk therapy can do for us, specifically with giving our mind, the mind loves to understand. So giving the mind something to understand. Oh, this happened, and then this happened. And so now this, and now that. So yeah, it's beautiful in that way. But I also believe that, especially working with more complex trauma or different belief systems that we've experienced in childhood or even past lives, perhaps, simply talking alone, talking for all your life isn't the thing that's going to pull you out of it. All right. In some cases, I believe it might even re traumatize the body. The mind is like, okay, I'm processing this. I'm recalling something that's happening from before. But the body is like, why are we reliving this over and over and over again? A big part of emotional alchemy process, reason why I love, is because it allow us to gain a deeper understanding of ourselves on all those levels. Physically, what is happening in the cells, cellular memory. If you've read the book, The Body Keeps the Score, you know what I'm talking about. Also, the emotional body, of course, all the complex little emotions happening. The energetic body, I love working with the energetic body. It holds so much. It can hold a lot of energetic debris, a lot of different people's emotions, perhaps our ancestors, our parents, unresolved stuff, also our spiritual body. What is all this very real human experience trying to tell me? From a bird's eye perspective, if I look from a healing, from a spiritual, from a oneness perspective, what is actually happening in my life right now? And what is asking of me? What is life asking of me? I believe in the power of tending to all these different layers of the body. So I developed this process, emotional alchemy, as a way to work with all these layers at once. And there are many tools that I love to bring in at different times depending on what we're working with. But one example, one of my favorite, with the EFT tapping, emotional freedom techniques. And I actually have a separate video where I went into all the details about EFT, including the origins, how to start practicing it, what it is. I believe that was the very, very first video that I created. So if you want to check that out, I will link that in the description box as well. If you are a sensitive, emotional being and maybe you're hearing all this and you're like, this sounds great. It is great. This is the reason why I love this work so much. There's so many reasons. Let me try to find just a few, which is okay. First one is it is very accessible. As I mentioned, I love using every moment of life as a practice ground. And I don't believe that healing is limited to just a 60-minute section. We shouldn't need to wait for an overseas retreat to really look at ourselves, look within, or, wait for Sunday in church, even though all of those things are beautiful. But there's a lot of beauty and gift in being able to learn a tool, a process, a way of attuning to our own emotions and let life, every moment of life, be our teacher, be a reflection of where we are in life. And so I love how accessible it is. And I love how we're essentially working with, not against anything. We're working with our emotions. We're not denying that we're an emotional being. We're working with life. We're listening to the little clues that life is dropping to us. And we're constantly turning toward life and answering the call and answering the call. And even if there's resistance, we go into resistance and we find out more about what's happening, and we can keep up leveling our life in that way and gaining greater and greater capacity to hold a better or best version, whatever dream version of you that you have envisioned, right? Because one of the YouTubers as well, teachers, the first person I've ever done EFT tapping with, Brett Yates, he loves to say the extent to which we don't have anything in life, right, is the extent to which we are resisting. And emotional alchemy is a wonderful process, and just a way of living of dropping the resistance and keep turning toward what is real and discovering the gem, the gold that is within. In essence, it is the art of alchemy, the art of transforming. Every single thing you touch become gold. Thank you, beautiful people, for allowing me to, or rather listening to me speaking about something that I'm so passionate about. If you are interested in just starting your emotional alchemist era, there are a couple of ways, going back to the videos and just practicing the different skills that I mentioned. Of course, there's the bundle that I mentioned. That's a self-paced, evergreen, different videos that you can keep, that's forever yours to keep, as well as working with me one-on-one. If you want to book a call, all the information I will put in the description box below. And if you found this helpful, make sure to give me a like, subscribe, comments, whatever feels true, feels correct for you. And I can't wait to see you soon next week.